When John McAfee was killed by the government, his entire fortune was wiped out. Spanish authorities arrested him on behalf of the US, and since his assets were not properly structured, everything was taken away and his partner was left with nothing. Meanwhile, Roman Abramovich saw the writing on the wall, so he made sure that all of his assets were structured properly in trusts, offshore jurisdictions, and multiple layers. So, when Western governments sanctioned him, there was very little they could actually seize. But the real question is, how do you protect your millions from governments, creditors, and most importantly, your batshit crazy ex-wife? Well, in the next few minutes, I'll break down exactly 10 rules to make sure that when someone comes after your wealth, they end up empty-handed. Anyway, let's get into it. First and foremost, what you do not own cannot be taken away from you. It sounds so simple, yet the ultra-wealthy take it extremely seriously. As I said with Abramovich, sanctioned but barely touched. Now, the funny thing is that most criminals actually understand and implement this rule better than modern minted millionaires. Despite being one of the richest men in history, Pablo Escobar's name barely appeared on any official assets. So after he was killed, the governments had very difficult time seizing any of his assets, and to this day, many believe that his immediate family controls much of his wealth. So don't fall for the lure of social media or status. Families that own much more than entire countries don't care about it. They don't need their title deed to be in their name or their yacht registration. You know, the Rockefeller saying, own nothing, control everything. Well, take a note from these billionaires. They may know a thing or two about money. Rule number 2, no country automatically enforces foreign judgments. Now, what do I mean by this? In other words, if a government or a court comes after your wealth, the rest of the world will not fall in line overnight. That's why we say offshore is better than onshore, because it gives you time to move your assets elsewhere before they get frozen. That's why you see Chinese billionaires, Russian billionaires, they do what? They invest in the West. Because if the Russian government comes after them with a judgment, the West isn't going to comply immediately. And so you want to apply the same strategy, but invest in the East. Now, the key is to use this delay to your advantage. And for trusts, that's where the Cuba clauses come into play, which essentially allows you to shift automatically all of your assets to a new jurisdiction in case of political or legal risk. So as an example, if you would have a Cyprus trust, you could actually add a clause that instantly migrates everything to Belize in case of duress. And this also helps against Mareva injunctions, which is an aggressive legal attack where the judge can literally freeze all of your assets before the trial begins. So if all of your wealth is locked up in one place, the judge can literally freeze your bank accounts, and that has happened quite a bit in the Cook Islands. But if you have correctly structured the Cuba clauses, this won't even matter because your assets won't be in the jurisdiction before the order lands. Next up, trust no one, including your lawyer. Don't trust me blindly either. Use your common sense. The problem with blindly trusting experts, even lawyers and accountants get things wrong. They have their own profit incentives, and sometimes they even get you sent to prison. Just ask Wesley Snipes. He was told by his lawyer that the US taxes don't apply to him and that he could just basically not report. And then when in court, he said, well, my lawyer told me it was fine. The government disagreed. 3 years in federal prison. Next up is rule number 4, and that is you want to manage your own money. This is extremely important for those who want to build trusts or private foundations. You want to have an operational company where you're the majority shareholder and it manages the bank accounts. A lot of people, they make the mistake of using a trust company and a lawyer that they've never met in their life, that they haven't built a relationship with, and thinking that they will have their interests at heart. It doesn't happen that way. Take Steve Harvey as an example. He owed the IRS $22 million because he gave over management of his finances early on in his career to a third-party accountant. He didn't manage his own money, and he got really hurt because of that. Rule number 5, implement tax optimization and asset protection when financial seas are calm. I know, most people, they don't buy fire insurance until they smell the smoke. But by then, it's too late. And the same thing applies to asset protection. If you think you're going to be moving your assets into a trust only when the creditors and debtors are knocking on your door, it's going to be 10 times harder, if not impossible. And the same thing is with cryptos. If you're trading in your own name and not through a corporate structure, you might think you're fine for now, but when the European Union implements DAC 8 starting next year, and the US will likely come out with something similar, the exchanges automatically report your holdings, and by that point, it's game over because you can't claim that you don't own the cryptos. There's a clear trail between you two. In fact, next up, rule number 6, avoid fraudulent conveyance. If you're being sued and you think, oh, I'm just going to transfer all of my assets to a trust, it's no longer in my name, it's in the name of some trustee, courts won't buy it. In fact, they may even reverse the transfer, claiming that you are trying to defraud the creditors or the government. And the best case I can come up with is actually with somebody I don't really vibe with, but it perfectly illustrates the point. Right before Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme collapsed, he tried to transfer all of his wealth to his wife and kids. And when the dust settled, the courts, they just clawed it all back. His wife lost all of $85 million of it, putting her in the firing line. So lesson number 1 is don't just transfer your assets to your family members. You're just going to put them into jeopardy. And lesson number 2 is set up your asset protection early. If you do it early enough, the courts, they will view it more favorably. Rule number 7, pigs get slaughtered, always pay some tax on paper. Yes, guys, I know I've made videos on how you can legally pay 0% using charitable donations and complex trusts, but in reality, even billionaires who could technically pay nothing end up paying something. And why is that? To get the regulators and the public off their backs. Because at the end of the day, it's all about control. Instead of all of their wealth being taxed, only a tiny pre-planned portion is viewed as taxable income. On their terms. They pay a little bit in order to avoid scrutiny. And the same thing applies to trusts. Instead of viewing it as a personal checking account, you should see it as a savings account for the wealth that you don't actually need. Because there can be a point where the accounting expenses and the CFO expenses to prove that all of it is for the benefit of the beneficiary, and you actually have separation between you and your assets, becomes so large that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. All right, next up we have the legal principle of substance over form and purpose and intent. Almost all countries, they use it, and essentially what it means is that courts, they don't care what you call your structure, they actually care what it does. So if you have a trust and there is no separation between you and your assets, you treat it like a personal piggy bank, guess what? They will pierce that corporate veil. Same thing goes for a private foundation or a charity. If you call it a charity and you're not actually doing charitable stuff, they're not going to give you those tax benefits. So it's extremely important for you to create this legal and accounting team so that you create that paper trail and you can present it properly and actually reap those benefits. Next up, and this one is a critical one, guys, do not put all of your eggs into one basket. You want to diversify, segregate, and compartmentalize. And what that means is to limit the liability by not putting all of your properties into one trust. Don't have your trust in the same country as your holding company. Same thing for banks. Don't have your bank account in the same jurisdiction as your operating company. Case in point, in Cyprus in 2013 with the bail-ins, those who only used Cyprus lost everything. I personally wouldn't even hold my money in a reputable bank account, all of it, because you don't know if the FDIC insurance will actually hold. And finally, rule number 10, we're coming back full circle. You want to stop governments, creditors, and your batshit crazy ex-wife by A, staying in control, trusting no one, moving assets off balance sheet, and most importantly, using protective legislation to your advantage. That's it for today's video, guys. If you enjoy this type of content, share it with a friend, like, subscribe, do whatever you want, but it does help with the algorithm. I made a previous presentation on how you can avoid capital controls, which are coming for all of us. You can check it out over there, but I'll be seeing you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.